Welcome to Season 3 of the Vanderbilt Political Review Podcast. If you're new here, my name is Noah Jenkins, and I am still the Vanderbilt's Political Review Podcast Director. Today we have a unique episode, a great episode, I think, with the Editor-in-Chief, our new Editor-in-Chief for VPR, Alícia Isasi. We first talk about what her goals for VPR this year are, and then we transition into a little preview of the debate we're going to have on October 1st over the topic of whether a president can take over a city, of course, relating to the whole National Guard situation regarding crime in D.C. and other cities. So without further ado, here's the first episode of this season. Welcome to the VPR podcast.
Thank
Our
you.
esteemed president and commander-in-chief, Alícia. How do you say last name again?
Isasi.
Isasi. Yeah, it's a very cool last name. I wish I had a cool last name. It's just Jenkins. Very plain Jane. Anyway, you are our new editor-in-chief, our former president that we had on last season, Andrew. He has gone on to fairer pastures, being a graduated student of Vanderbilt. So you have taken up the mantle. You are now our Valorant leader. And the reason I wanted to have you on first is to, number one, test our new setup here, which I'm going to switch to the wide shot now. You can certainly see it's a lot more refined than what we had before. You can see our beautiful logo here. If you're listening via audio, sorry you can't see it, but it's just the podcast cover art. So there you go. But also, I just wanted to give you a platform to introduce yourself and to just a little springboard for this semester's and this year's podcast series. So welcome again, Alícia. Off the top of your head, any big... Well, let's start with this, actually. Let's start with like your general vision for VPR, what you want to see with it, where you want to see it go. Take that however you wish.
Yeah, I love that question. I have a lot of ideas for VPR, and I think it aligns with the core mission of VPR, creating a political forum for students to discuss some of today's most pressing political issues. At heart, like I'm so passionate about civil discourse, and I know the words civil discourse and dialogue get floated around a lot, especially on Vanderbilt's campus. Yeah. But what I really think makes VPR unique and the opportunity I have is to create an opportunity for students, not, the administration or faculty, but for students to have conversations with one another, explore issues without, the fear of, is this person going to judge me? What are they going to say? Because I think what makes Vanderbilt students so special is they really do engage with issues. And, the debates we've hosted last year have shown how respectful Vanderbilt students are. So I just want to build on that. I want to expand VPR itself, so create more opportunities for our immediate members to, engage with one another, to have discussions on political issues. That's a format we're kind of piloting for our GBMs, but also professional development opportunity. VPR students, as in general, are interested in similar fields, whether that's politics, law, and I really want to create an opportunity for them to kind of develop those professional skills and network a bit, I'd say. And then I guess for the wider campus, kind of falling in the line of last year, create campus-wide debate opportunities. And, we're going to talk about that in a moment. Yes. But yeah, I think overall, just continuing the foundation that's been laid the past couple of years, but growing the org, growing our mission, and creating those dialogue opportunities. Yeah.
And I think a big part of that is having people in the organization. And you probably have the raw numbers more in your head than I do, but like we have a lot of new members, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on VPR for 3 years now. This year
You're old.
I know. It's always a little bit of a jump scare at this point. But this year, we had the most applicants I've ever seen. We had 76 applicants, and we've grown our writer base or our staff to 120 students. So that includes our senior editors, our exec team, our writers. And from the turnout we had at the GBM yesterday, I know you unfortunately couldn't attend, but I mean, the room was packed. It was truly fantastic to see.
Good. Yeah. I guess my next question is just, I'll frame it this way, like, The Hustler, which for those who don't know, but everyone should know, is our school newspaper. They have a sort of, to be rather blunt, like an institutional sort of institutional sort of nature to it. It's a Vanderbilt institution in a very deep rooted and true way. It's seen with a sort of prestige when people, I write for the Hustler, or when people look at the Hustler as an institution, it has very deep rootedness in Vanderbilt, and again that prestige. Do you aspire for VPR to achieve that similar level, or even like a level like some other political reviews like at Harvard or other schools, like it's really seen as an esteemed place of political discourse, to use your term? So first, do you aspire to that, which I think probably going to be yes, but secondly, more importantly, what do you have in mind to perhaps get VPR to that point?
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
I really want VPR to become an institution at Vanderbilt, and I think it's on its way. VPR is becoming a much more name brand or recognized student organization on campus, and I think a lot of that was our campus events. So our Vanderbilt College Democrats and Republicans debate series the past 2 years has garnered hundreds of students in attendance. It's gotten students talking, and we're also partnering with other organizations. What's really great about having you and other members who are affiliated with VCR or VCD, it creates that opportunity to connect with other organizations. And in terms of prestige, I think this year marks a great opportunity to kind of grow on what VPR is and make it name brands. We've revamped our website, so now it looks like a formal political journal.
Yeah.
It's
cool fonts, right?
Yeah, it's much more professional.
Fonts, right?
Yeah. And I think down the road, we're looking towards creating a political union of sorts, kind of borrowing from traditional like New England school political union or European formats.
Yeah.
And instead of just having the informal partnership with VCR and VCD, I want to create an opportunity, and I know you share it and other members of the exec share it, to have a formal,
institutionalized, right?
Institution, forum for these political organizations to come together, have conversations, and really get our name out there, not just on campus, but also spread who VPR is past the confines of Vanderbilt, past confines of Nashville, and kind of rival some of those bigger political journals that, we may all know.
Yeah. I guess we can transition now to the October 1st debate that we're looking forward to. It's also going to serve as a segue to our short discussion we're going to have today between the two of us. I think there might be some disagreement, but that's the point, the discourse, right?
Exactly.
So tell us a little about the October 1st debate and what, those who will be in attendance should look forward to seeing.
Yeah, so we're excited to bring the Vanderbilt campus a debate between VCR, Vanderbilt College Democrats, Republicans, and for the first time, VPR representatives on Trump's deployment of the National Guard. So we're kind of framing it as, can a president take over a city? So we're going to have a conversation about the implications of deploying the National Guard in Los Angeles, in Washington, D.C., as well as the potential for the administration to do so elsewhere. So we're really going to just have a conversation on what's the implications, what is executive authority here, what does this mean in the context of checks and balances or a federalist system, should military be policing civilians in the first place? Just addressing some of these fundamental issues at hand. And as you mentioned, October 1st, we'd love for Vanderbilt to turn out for it. There's going to be an interactive component, an opportunity for the audience to participate. I think it's a
in the format
issue.
Too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a new format. It's much more informal. It's not going to be the traditional debate styles. It's going to be a conversation. So yeah, not dissimilar to the one we're about to have. In fact, the one we're going to have right now. Yes.
All right. So that's part one. Giving everyone an introduction to VPR under the presidency of Alícia. In part two is a little conversation about this topic, a little preview of what we hope, or we're sure to some degree is going to be, what you hear on October 1st, assuming you come to the debate. Where should we start? There's so many places to start. I don't know if you want to kick it off, or if you want me to just drop us in somewhere.
Go ahead.
All right, let's drop us in somewhere. I guess let's start with the 10,000 foot view. So we won't be dropped in just yet.
Okay.
We'll still be floating at 10,000 feet. it is what Trump's doing concretely. Let's just start in DC. Is what he's doing in DC appropriate? And yeah, I'll start off with that. Then we can go into more deeper questions. Just 10,000 foot view.
I mean, personally, I'd say no.
Okay.
Unsurprising. I think this was
surprise.
The conversation we knew was coming. And I mean, there's going to be legal debate about what he's doing, and
let's put the legal aside for now. Let's just talk about like the substance, like more morally, right?
Yeah, I mean, my concern is that he's using the National Guard, our military, as a political weapon.
Yeah.
I don't think presidents should be using legal loopholes or turning to the military as a first or second resort. And to me, the National Guard should be our last resort. It should be in case of emergency. In the case of DC, where we see crime as, being framed as an emergency nature, to me, that's concerning. If crime is an emergency, then what's next? And I think we do...
Slippery slope idea.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope. And whether the president can do this, I think that the problem is whether he should, whether he's setting a dangerous precedent for the future. I mean, on top of the National Guard, you have the federalization of sorts of local police. I mean, to me, that's concerning. That's subverting local authority.
We'll get there, but yeah.
Yeah, and I know DC's, again, in the legal side, kind of tricky. But yeah, I would just say I fear an executive who has too much power over local state authority, what it may be, but even more so, the politicization of our military.
Okay. Well, I begin by saying, I think you're wrong. Surprise, surprise. Well, first of all, like I wanted to differentiate DC from the states because of what DC is. DC is a federal district. DC is what I'd call a living monument. It is a place, a neutral orbiting ground for all the other 50 states, which is also why it shouldn't be a state itself. That's a different conversation. And with that being said, it is something different than your run-of-the-mill town anywhere else. And that means I think we got to treat it differently. I think it could have worked out, but I think it has shown itself to be a mistake to allow DC to rule itself. It clearly, I mean, we both were there this summer. I mean, was it like, Afghanistan? No, obviously. It wasn't like, it wasn't the worst thing you could ever imagine on the face of the earth. But given that that's our national capital, that representatives from all over the world come into DC, and that's, for many of them, that's their view of what America is. And if you come to a country's capital, you have the presumption that this is the pinnacle of what this country has to present to the rest of the world. It's the capital of the place, right? And given what I saw, and I'm sure what you to varying degrees saw, it's concerning. Like there are parts of DC that are just blocks away from Capitol Hill that, to be quite frank, are just straight up ghettos, right? And that obviously reaches to a deeper problem. Like Trump sending National Guard's not going to make them not ghettos, right? But I think it's getting, to the principle of what Trump's getting at here, which is that, it is unacceptable for us to allow DC to exist in the state it is, especially as it relates to the level of crime that exists in DC. Crime's been coming down. Putting aside the whole cooking of the books thing that I do think is happening there, it's like, how do you define crime? It's kind of up to like, in part the attorneys, in part how the judges, it's many things working there. Besides that, like, it's sort of like when they said that, the rate that inflation is increasing by is decreasing. It's like, okay, well, inflation's still too high, Similarly, I mean, same thing with Memphis, right? It's like, the crime rate's it's coming down. It's at an all-time low. It's like, well, your all-time low is still extremely high for what it ought to be. So that's my argument for DC in particular. I'll say one more thing. I've been talking a lot, I know. It goes back to the political philosophy underlying everything. I'm not a moral and legal positivist, right? I don't think, we ought to just follow the Constitution or any of these written documents just because they're words written on a sheet of paper. No, to be clear, I think it is prudent in most cases to act within the confines of the Constitution and act within like the plain meaning of things and all that stuff, or act even within convention of how constitutional things and constitutional norms, federalistic norms, and all these things. However, I think the ultimate job of a government is to ensure or to protect the common good and to protect people's ability to achieve the basic forms of human good. And when you have a problem like crime running rampant in DC, that is so against that goal of government, then I do think that more drastic measures can be taken. It's a lot to put on the table.
Yeah,
over to you.
No, I appreciate all the points made. Yeah. I'll address in two parts. First, the crime issue, and second, the unique nature of DC. In terms of crime, as you mentioned, I was in DC this summer, and I don't disagree that there's nothing wrong with wanting a safer city. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, so I wasn't living in the city, but not
the South Side, right?
No, but the crime problem you hear of Chicago, like I grew up hearing that. Yeah. It was universal. My parents lived in DC back in the 1980s. Crime was a massive issue then. I've heard pretty much horror stories of my parents going to Georgetown, and I think the issue is you can want a safer city, but it can't be at the expense of American principles, American norms, and our system of governance. The way I see it is, even if DC is this special zone, or the president has unique authority over the National Guard in DC, he can deploy it without federalizing it, and they are only responsive to him. This isn't an issue of the states. The principle that military should not be used for civilian policing, that should be sacrosanct regardless.
But why?
I think it goes back all the way to the time of our founding fathers. There was the real concern, following the British rule of a tyrannical government utilizing a standing army, a federal army, against the civilians. And the way our government is built is a separation of powers between the states and the federal government. The states can deploy and mobilize their National Guard, and they're responsible for their own standing militias of sorts. Yeah. I think that is one of the core aspects of this issue. There is a fear of policing by military. Their role is not civilian policing. They're deployed elsewhere. They are trained for specific issues outside of the purview that police live in the communities. Their goal is to form relations and keep their communities safe.
I want to push on two things here, and then I know you have a second point on this DC being different, but just to say on this point, then we can clarify the next point. I'll say one thing. As a matter of prudence and practicality, I think you are right insofar as the National Guard is not meant to be a long-standing civilian police force. They're meant for emergencies. They're trained that way, which means they're meant to do things in short stints. So my hope for what Trump's idea in DC is to have the National Guard there as a stopgap for a longer term solution in DC, which, by the way, will need to involve Congress. But Congress, for some reason, even though the Republicans have everything locked up, Congress apparently has forgotten how to pass anything but a budget bill. So I don't.
Congress has forgotten how to do a lot of things.
Congress. Anyway, it's a different conversation.
That is,
but just to acknowledge that point of agreement. But to back up to the whole founding principle, very important principle to who we are as a people. Fair enough, and I don't think that's worth nothing. However, let's just make a hypothetical here. I'll make it clear it's hypothetical. I'm pushing on the extremes here. Let's say that it's not even an emergency per se, because you just say it's an emergency and then the National Guard's justified. But let's just say crime in DC gets very bad, not as an emergency, not like a riot that's going on for 2 weeks, a particular situation. It's not that. It's a state of affairs. Analogous to Chicago. Chicago's violence is not an emergency in the sense that it's not a short-term situation. It's just what Chicago I hate to be slandering your city here, but it's kind of a state of affairs in Chicago. So what if in DC it was like that, but worse, just really, really bad, just really bad state of affairs. Mayor Muriel Bowser, like Mario, and her DC council have shown themselves to mean, they already shown themselves to be incompetent in our timeline. But let's just say really, really, really incompetent in this alternate timeline. Congress, as we just said, doesn't know how to do anything. And Trump's like, okay, I know we have this principle of, of what you just said, like, having all these norms and all that stuff to avoid, the appearance of tyranny, all that stuff, right? However, the common good, maintaining the common good, protecting the ability for people to achieve the basic forms of human good in their life requires me to take this great action. Would you then say that that would be appropriate then?
So I would say...
Or is it a matter of degree?
I mean, look, there's always been examples where if you are in actual crisis, then that is the purpose of the National Guard, to be deployed. But in this case, I don't think this is an issue of the common good. I don't think what Trump is doing in DC reflects some need to solve, like his desire to solve an issue that is afflicting the lives of his citizens. To me, this is just politics. If you have a real crisis, then by all means, I respect the president's decision to deploy National Guard, even go over the heads of the governors. I mean, we've seen that in history.
So you agree with me in terms of the political theory here then?
I agree that in theory, and that historically, there is evidence that in times of need, the president needs to deploy the National Guard regardless of political ramifications, regardless of
or just to violate norms in general.
Yes. I mean, that's happened back in the Civil Rights Movement. The president's going over the heads of the governors because they're blatantly violating the civil rights protesters' rights and their lives. So to me, that's justified. I don't think this is the case. If you look at DC, the purported crime, like crime is an issue. I'm not going to say it's not, just as it is in Chicago or New York. But why are we talking about these states when you have Memphis and St. Louis?
We're talking about those places too, to be honest.
But you don't have the same threat of deployment to these cities and states. This is just, to me, a political ploy.
Well, I think it's a good transition to your second point about DC being different, or how DC is different from the other states in general, right? Because DC is not a state itself. I mean, I would, just to reiterate, to bring us back, I would say that Trump deploying the National Guard in DC, even if crime isn't as bad as Memphis or Chicago, is reflective and emblematic of how I think he properly thinks the role of DC, what the role of DC is, right? And what it ought to be, again, the living monument to the country. I don't think we should tolerate, obviously you can't get crime to zero anywhere, just, that's ridiculous. But we should not be tolerating anywhere close to the degree of crime that happens in DC, along with, I think, many other structural issues that I was talking about, like the whole ghettos thing, and that's separate, obviously. But you get the idea. It's all part of this framework of viewing DC. Now, this is a good transition. I'll grant that for states that are not, again, DC is not a state, for the other states, or for the states, right, and the jurisdictions they're in, I do think it's a little different. I think the bar needs to be a little higher, just because that excuse, for lack of a better term, of DC being this special living monument doesn't exist for other cities. With that being said, I do think that Memphis and Chicago are kind of getting there, but push it back to you.
I mean, I completely agree. It's a different situation, and I don't disagree I believe President Trump wants to clean up DC. I agree from the executive order I've read from him. From if you go on Truth Social or anything like that, you can always see.
Do you have Truth Social on your phone?
I do not. I often I'll get screenshots from people.
Do you have X?
I don't either.
Wow. Do you have Facebook?
I don't.
Do you have Instagram?
I do.
You have Instagram. Okay, you're a Zoomer. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
I've never heard that term before.
Zoomer? Really?
No.
The boomers and the Zoomers?
I've never heard that. But
the two dualities, and it's a different conversation, but go on. Sorry. I'm derailing you over and over.
I've lost
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, you're talking about you do believe Trump actually wants to keep things secure, but
and I agree that as the capital of our country, as the center of the federal government, this place where national leaders travel and visit, I agree that it should be a safe place. There shouldn't be crime. I mean, that's a kind of like a dystopian view, though. I think that's true of any city. You could argue Chicago and New York are more important than DC.
That's no, I wouldn't say that, but
I mean, maybe not in the political sphere, but to the economy of our country or to commerce, to business.
You're making a very good point, Alícia. Keep going.
I think you could argue these are more important cities in a sense. So when we're deciding how to address crime or how to address issues plaguing cities, I have no issue with that. I think crime needs to be combated in DC, in Chicago, in New York. But you have to question the means through which we do it. Should it be by a president? Should it be by the National Guard? Are these going to solve the issues, make them worse? And then what are the ramifications on the back end? What is the issue with the precedent this sets?
Yeah. Well, I want to pull on the thing that you started saying. Chicago and New York are very important cities to American commerce, as you mentioned, among trade, etc. Yeah, I think Chicago is symbolically not the same as DC. I think DC formally is very special, obviously, but I think in a less formal sense, Chicago, New York, your San Francisco's, your LA's, less so Memphis, to be honest, are very important to America symbolically, especially New York and Chicago. Like, come on, and to allow them to. So I'll put it this way: it's what I said on NPR like 2 weeks ago. Chicago has a degree of importance as a city to Americans universally in New York. That is not true of, let's say, a Memphis or a Jacksonville, which actually has gotten a lot better, by the way, or even in Miami. Like every American has more of a stake, I think, in Chicago and New York, especially New York, than some of these other metro areas. I think that means something symbolically. I think that plays into the calculus as to whether you sending the National Guard there. To be clear, I'm not saying that like the lives of the people in Memphis matter less. I think we can agree that crime needs to be tackled in all these places. I think crime's bad and you need to go down. I think what we're really discussing now is whether the mechanism is just, right? Of using the National Guard.
That's the issue.
And so let's put aside the whole like crime is bad because we agree on that. Whether this mechanism is just. And what I think that turns on a lot is, and again, the mechanism we're talking about is the National Guard, right, which has a purpose. And I think what it turns on a lot is to the degree to which the cities are going to has national importance, which is what would justify a nationalization, a federalization of the National Guard to be sent into these places. Toss that back over to you.
I mean, I think just because a city or a state is of, more importance, as you mentioned, a Chicago versus a Memphis.
Yeah.
I don't think that changes anything in this case. Maybe we should care about crime in these locations more than others, potentially.
Well, again, I wanted to clarify the thing I just clarified. It's not that I care about the lives of the people in Chicago more than the lives of the people in Memphis. It's not a question of just whether we ought to generally fight crime. It's a question, because we agree on that, crime bad, we should fight it, right? It's a question of this mechanism is using a federalized National Guard, right? If you're federalizing it, nationalizing the National Guard, making them act away from the discretion of that state's governors, right? Because we're putting DC aside now, we're talking about the states now. To do that, I think a principle that maybe we can agree upon is that if you're going to federalize it, if it's going to come from the president, directing the National Guards, Illinois National Guard, the New York National Guard, it needs to be an issue of national importance to some degree. As it was in the Civil Rights era, I think we can agree that, these states being insubordinate to the Supreme Court of the whole country is a national concern. My argument, just to reiterate again, is just that it's a national concern when cities of national concern, of particular national concern, are in their current state of affairs.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get the idea of this national importance.
Where's the but? It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming. But I still don't think crime, just yearly traditional crime that's afflicting these cities, is considered of emergency nature. I think that's still the issue at heart. Because for me, I don't care if it's California or Chicago, whatever it may be, or Tennessee. You're still subverting local and state authority if you go over the head.
Is that sacrosanct? Like, must federal or state and local authority never be
No.
superseded?
It will, and it has been. I don't think that's a unique issue. But I think, again, it comes down to why.
Yeah.
And I personally, which I think we might disagree a little bit on, is crime to me will never, unless it's extreme crime, like we see mass protests are becoming violent.
I see.
Will never constitute.
It's funny because at the VCR meeting they had a couple days ago, the question was, should the National Guard be sent to Memphis? I said no, at least as of now. And my no was in part because of what I just said. Memphis is not that important of a place of national importance. Not that important of a place of national importance, what a sentence. But you know what I'm trying to say. And then also because more along the lines of what you kind of just said, surprisingly, be a little mavericky right now, the crime you're seeing in Memphis is not an emergency. It's an ongoing state of affairs, right? And that might seem like it's going against what I said earlier. However, the difference is crime not being, so like if it's an emergency, National Guard justified, period, right?
Yes.
It's like how the decision matrix in my head goes. If emergency, National Guard justified. I don't care where you are in the country. We can't be having total lawlessness, and if the locals aren't handling it, you know, the buck keeps being passed up until the buck stops at the feds, right? If not an emergency, if an ongoing state of affairs, then it's the question of, okay, is there some implication of national importance here that will justify the national? That's the whole point I was making earlier, right? So if there's not that implication of national importance, it's not an emergency, then I agree with you, right? What it seems to me is that you think that first criterion of whether it's an emergency or not is the ultimate criterion for using the National Guard. Would that be fair to say?
I think it should be a very high bar because, again, to me, and I think this is an argument made by many, is the National Guard should be the last resort. We shouldn't turn to police or to military automatically to address issues.
Right.
Especially when you have like a local community or a city where that issue, let's say crime, has been plaguing their location for decades, for centuries, whatever it may be. In my opinion, they're in the best situation to address it.
What if they're not, though? Like Chicago, like the locals have been trying to solve it for the last 60 years, and it's...
You know, I'm not going to pretend to know how to address crime.
Fine.
Or anything
I'm asking you how. I guess the question more is just like...
It's complicated.
What if the locals haven't, you know?
Yeah.
But I'll ask you the specific question. Would you be more okay with the use of the National Guard in like Chicago, New York, these outside of DC places, if, let's say, Trump in the Congress said, okay, it's still over state authority, by the way, but let's say, okay, like we have like a long-term sort of solution we're trying to build here. But in the meantime, just to stop the slaughter that happens in Chicago every weekend, let's put the National Guard in as a short-term stopgap between now and then when this long-term solution comes into effect. If that was a situation, would you still be more okay with it, or would it not really change anything for you?
I just don't see worlds in which that would happen.
Okay.
Where
it's an irrelevant hypothetical.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look at Los Angeles, there are still National Guard there. And I mean, to me, it's like you can say you're going to send them in the short term, but if you decide to, I'm just going to push the bill on what they're doing here, push the timeline, it very quickly becomes an issue. And again, I don't think the National Guard will solve things. I think there's many aspects to crime, and it's a wicked problem, as Professor Lewis would say.
It's a wicked problem, yeah.
But I think it does come down to, it has come from local, it has come from state. I think the federal government is in a position to support efforts to combat crime, but it needs to be in that support role, not in the, I'm going to come into your city, boot you out of control over what's going on and impose my will.
Okay. I'll ask you one last question, kind of a political philosophy question. So one last one. What I'm getting from everything you're saying is that there's a balance between the concern for this being a slippery slope, which isn't always a fallacy, and I'll grant it's kind of, I'd say, a valid concern here, of it's setting a precedent for military control that can be abused later, right? It's a balance, but it's this classic balance in social contract theory, which I think is kind of cringe, but it still exists in the more classical social covenant framework too, of balancing security and order with freedoms and liberties. It's a balance, right? Obviously, in the security and order side in this conversation would be like the, nope, they're not beating crime, especially when the localities like Chicago just have shown themselves to be totally incompetent over decades. And on the freedom side, it's like, well, we don't want to open up the door to, the feds walking around, right? I guess the question just is, how would you balance these two things? Would you where would you put like the fulcrum of the scale? I guess I'm asking what would have to happen for you to put aside your concern of the slippery slope happening and allow the feds to come in and do what they need to do? Putting you on the spot here. I apologize.
I don't know
it's
if I
fine.
have a fine line. I can't point to one example where I'm like, if this happens, then it's all over. President can come in, do whatever they want.
Is it a Potter Stewart? I know it when I see it.
I do agree that there's a balance. For me personally, I kind of try to lean towards the protecting of liberty, protecting of, democratic values, whatever it may be. And I think, but, to me, law and order is just as important. So I think it's complicated. And I think in this case, it's going to come down to is who has authority here. And I think that's a conversation for later.
Yeah.
You can get into executive overreach and
this can go on for hours.
But I'm not sure, I'd say. I think I don't know if there's something I could point to other than the president's use of the National Guard during the Civil Rights Movement in Alabama and Arkansas. I would point to that and say that was a justified use of the Insurrection Act and, going above states' authorities. But, I think in the end, it comes down to what is an emergency? What are the implications of a president's actions?
Yeah. And ladies and gentlemen, that is how a lot of conversations will end. A difference in first principles, which is fine, but that's why we have these conversations so we can start sussing out some of those first differences, principles over the course of several dialogues. I guess I'll just say as a closing note that, you get to enjoy your freedoms once the valid concern of or the great concern of not being slaughtered in your own city is dealt with first. But that's just me. That's just Alícia with what she said. The entire time she didn't even touch her cup of water. It just sat there all lonely. Anyway, that's enough. Noah Jenkins again with the Vanderbilt Political Review podcast. Alícia, I can't say your last. I say last name again. Isasi. There you go. Our Valorant editor-in-chief of the Vanderbilt Political Review. Thank you again for coming on, and I hope to see you guys for the next one. Thanks.